It's my pleasure to introduce this year's 2015 Hurricane Prep Made Simple. I will acknowledge that this is my first such prep. I am the Vice President and Chief Medical Officer of University of Texas Medical Branch here in Galveston. Given the events of this past few days in Houston, I think that we can certainly acknowledge that the season should be interesting from a weather perspective. There are a couple key messages that we hope that the session will provide. It is an opportunity to provide our employees and students and faculty an idea of the upcoming hurricane season, reflect the confidence that we have in a very structured incident command, look at the decision-making process, as well as to increase awareness about the steps that each of you need to take to be safe and remain effective as employees at UTMB throughout the storm. We'll also detail the process of recovery following a potential storm and answer any questions at the end. We have a very rich agenda with multiple constituents to cover the various aspects of hurricane preparedness. We'll first start with an overarching comment from me as Institutional Emergency Preparedness Officer, some simple facts and messages of what you can do to prepare. Mr. Mike Mastrangelo will discuss business operations and facilities from the perspective of the 2015 season forecast from the National Weather Service perspective. Deborah Conley will discuss employee preparedness, followed by Lieutenant Raymond Cooper discussing safety and security. Seth Fry will discuss the business continuity planning, and we'll complete with Stephen Campbell discussing communications and all the various modalities that we'll use to communicate in the event of a storm. Thank you all for coming here. This is also being taped, and there will be other ways to access this information beyond this noon session. Over the course of the next 45 minutes or so, we hope to discuss the upcoming storm season and review with you the benefits of a very structured incident command and a triggered response, given the fact that I think my understanding here in Galveston, it's not if a hurricane is coming, it's when. I'm learning that very quickly. But I want to reiterate that UTMB has a very proven structure that's in place, has trained its people well with active drills and planning, and has a wealth of resources and experiences upon which to base decisions during each phase of an emergency. And last comment about emergencies, if you've seen one, you've seen one. So in the context of that reality, having a very tried and true and structured approach is the way to prepare. As I move through the slides, I think the slide clicker is there. I will, couple key points, prepare, like the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts. Don't be complacent. You should have a plan that involves a personal plan and a family plan, and have that plan now. Keep needed emergency supplies on hand. Talk with your supervisor, faculty advisor, so you know your role at UTMB before, during, and after an emergency. Update any and all contact information in UTMB alerts, and this will be a recurrent alert throughout this talk. And for employees, it's incumbent upon you to read the IHOP policy 3.11, which discusses staffing during adverse conditions, and your department business continuity plan. And we'll go over that in further detail shortly. Just an overarching structural commentary. We have a very rigorous UTMB incident command that deals with preparedness, response, recovery, and mitigation. And I think that structure lays in place for any emergency. We're talking today about hurricane preparedness, but that extends to any unforetold emergency that we may have to tackle on our campuses. This is a slide that I want you to read and memorize, not necessarily, but basically goes over the wealth of resources and structure in place at the level of the Incident Command Center, where decisions are largely made from the top down in a structured and organized way. And I think the important point of that is that it illustrates the comprehensive nature of the incident command structure here at UTMB, which, given the fact, again, that hurricanes are not a question of if, but more when, being prepared is key. To that end, we have a escalation or a trigger report. We have a very structured way in which we scale up our response based on events, and this ties in as well with the issue of being prepared. We know what steps to take and in what timing and in what sequence, and that actually works very well. So even though you've seen one emergency, you've seen only one emergency, in many ways having the structure in place and having a very organized approach makes us not forget anything and makes us ensure the safety of our faculty, our employees, and our patients. So in summary of roles in emergency, incident command leads all aspects of operations and response and authorizes any closure of schools or offices. I will repeat that decision is made at that level, not at the supervisor or the employee level. The supervisors and faculty advisors follow the lead of the incident command to inform employees and students of emergency prep duties and the timing of any authorized closures. And then finally, employees and students need to follow the lead of those who are leading them. And as a quick reiteration, no one is authorized to leave school or work unless officially authorized to do so by the institution. And I think that ties in, especially in the context of the care that we provide our patients, because we certainly don't want to leave our patients uncovered. This is a flashing lights, kind of the picture of a soda during a movie. You will see this more than once. UTMB alerts, it's the most rapid notice of an emergency, and please update your text, mobile, or other smartphone device as a way to get in touch about events that are happening on the campus. And that's hurricanes, but other things as well. With that, I'm going to turn over the next stage of the presentation to Mr. Mastrangelo, who I've learned is our local expert on all things prepared.
Okay, so I wanted to give you sort of an overview of what we expect this hurricane season. I've got good news and I have bad news. Well, first off, there's a cooler tropical Atlantic. The waters off of Cape Verde, Africa, are a little bit cooler than normal this year. That's where those big, powerful Atlantic storms develop. The other thing, too, is that we've got a fairly strong El Nino. That may be in part what's contributing to the rain that we've gotten over the spring. Those two things generally mean that we have a lower probability of the number of storms and severity of storms. And if you look here, you'll see a couple of forecasts or outlooks for the season compared to the long-term average, where you've got number of storms as 12, number of hurricanes about 6.5, and then the number of major storms, which would be a category 3 or above, at 2 per season. The Colorado State outlook is calling for 7 storms total, 3 of those hurricanes, possibly 1 severe. The National Weather Service came out with their outlook yesterday, in fact, and they're looking at 6 to 11 storms. 3 to 6 of those would be hurricanes, and possibly 0 to 2 of those would be severe. So, it seems like this is all good news. Are we in the clear this year? Well, 1983 was an inactive season as well. It just had 4 named storms, but one of those was Hurricane Alicia. If some of you may remember that, it formed in the it formed in the, right about here in the Gulf, with about 2 to 3 days notice. Another example was Audrey in 1957, which formed in the Bay of Campeche and then traveled straight up to the Texas-Louisiana border. Barry is another example. So since 1950, there have been a number of years where you had a fairly strong El Nino like we have today, like we have this season, but some pretty powerful storms. So Audrey in 57, Alicia in 83, Andrew in 92, all of these were major hurricanes. And then 8 of those 12 formed in the Gulf. So normally we think about having about a week, 5 days notice to a major storm. It's possible if it forms in the Gulf, we could have 2 to 3 days notice. So in summary, we've got below normal activity is expected based on the predicted El Nino and cooler than average ocean waters. But even in a quiet year, major hurricanes, landfalls are still possible. So if we do get a hurricane, it's more likely to be one that forms in the Gulf of Mexico, which means that we have less lead time. So the bottom line is, we've got that good news, lower probability. I tell folks that it was about 2 years or so ago, the probability of being hit by a meteor is pretty astronomical. But about 2 years ago, about 600 people were killed by a meteor. So it only takes one, and we have to be prepared. And in this particular year, it's a little bit more complicated because we may have to speed up our response time if we get one of those Gulf developers and need to mobilize quickly. So here's your UTMB alerts reminder, and I'll just add that text or SMS is the best method. So when you go into the directory and update your emergency contact information, you can set what preference you want in terms of the way that you're notified, and I'd suggest that you go ahead and use that text as your first priority. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Debbie Conley.
Okay, we want to talk a little bit about what we as employees need to be doing right now in preparation. You should have already signed your employee acknowledgement form. That is an opportunity for you to have a discussion with your supervisor, or if you're a supervisor, with your employees about what their role will be during an emergency and whether they will be considered what we call an essential employee, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. But if you haven't already done that, it's imperative that you get that form signed right away. But it's also time to be sure that you have a plan with your family, and don't forget your pets. That sometimes becomes a huge issue for some folks. Know what your family's going to do, because it's going to be hard for you to make plans here if you have family concerns. Sometimes, there's a year between hurricane seasons, and many times our personal situations change. So if you've been an essential employee and something has changed within your family situation, like a birth of a child or an elderly relative that you have to care for, or some other type of change, be sure you talk with your supervisor so that it can be arranged before there's a storm in the Gulf as to what your responsibilities will be. We also strongly encourage you to enroll in My Chart if you aren't already enrolled in that. As you know, that is a way of accessing your medical record electronically through your mobile device or your computer. That is particularly useful if you relocate some distance away. You have a lot of the essentials of your medical record with you in case you need medical care. Now, I mentioned being an essential employee. We used to think of those people who stayed in the facility during the storm as being the ones considered E1s or essential, but there are several ways that one might be considered an essential employee. Certainly, if you're part of the ride-out team, which is going to be a very small, probably much smaller than in past years, a very small group that would be required to stay on campus to ride out the storm and protect resources when patients have been evacuated, That's one type of essential employee. We have had occasions when we evacuate patients where we need medical staff to go with the patient to wherever their destination is going to be. So if that's a role that you're asked to play, you would be essential. Many of you may be assigned to work at an alternative location. Payroll, for instance, generally relocate. IS, Information Services, frequently relocates. Many of you with our electronic age now can do your job from a remote location. So if you're required to continue your work during the emergency, that would be an essential status. And then some of you may be asked to come relieve those who've been working during the emergency as soon as the roads open before there's a general call for employees to return. So that would also be considered an essential status. Now, depending on the situation, your roles may change, so it's important that you follow your supervisor's direction at the time of the emergency. Especially if you're one of these essential people, you need to be thinking about your emergency bag, what you would need to fulfill your responsibilities. If you're going to have to go somewhere, what are you going to need to take with you? I was caught a little short after Ike when my supervisor asked me to bring as many wet wipes as I could find because there was no running water. Try finding wet wipes when there are no stores open. So, think about those comfort items or those essential items that you may want to have with you. Medication, be sure, you're not on your last pill if you take a medication, those sorts of things. Probably most of you already have direct deposit, but we found out after Ike that we had some employees who did not have direct deposit, and checks were not delivered on payday because of rising water. And so some folks found themselves in a difficult situation without money. So if at all possible, if you aren't already enrolled in some direct deposit, do that. If you are an essential employee, be sure you have one of the orange hang tags, and they'll talk about that more later, and an orange placard for your car so that you will have a place to park. We talked about updating your emergency contact information. You can use employee self-service to do that. And think about when you do that, if you're not going to be at home, your home phone number is probably not the most helpful number to be there. So think about where you will be in case of an emergency if you're going to relocate and provide that information, or a cell phone, or essential roles may change. Today, your supervisor may tell you, this is what I'm going to expect. But based on the situation at the time, people go on vacation, so someone who may have been fulfilling a different role isn't here. So know that your role can change. It's important that you monitor all UTMB communications, and you're going to hear more about that in a few minutes, during and after the emergency, and then do what it says. Okay, that's critical, that you don't leave work until the communications say you're released. And then there will be a communication that says all employees are expected to return at a particular time. It's important that you return at that time. Now, we know that sometimes people evacuate to long distances, and if you see that you will not be able to get back at the time that you're instructed, be sure you contact your supervisor and let them know that. Certainly, you're going to perform whatever duties are assigned, and those may be a little bit different than your regular duties. And those of you who've been here through previous emergencies know you may find yourself doing some unusual things that don't have a lot to do with your usual role. And we talked about staying until you're released. If you leave prior to being released by incident command, then that will be your own time. That will not be administrative leave. Okay, so if you leave early, you must have supervisor approval, but it'll be your own time until that designated release time. If you do not return at the designated return time, you will again be on your own time, and you let your supervisor know your situation. Everybody wants to know, how am I going to get paid during this? So for employees who are non-exempt, that means you're eligible for overtime. You will be paid for all hours worked and any hours that you're required to remain on site. So if you get overtime, if you accrue overtime during that time, you'll be paid overtime. Exempt employees, salaried employees, will be paid their regular salary and possibly a lump sum payment at the end of the emergency if it's a significant emergency, and that'll be determined at the time. In the past, you folks have accrued a lot of comp time. We won't be doing compensatory time. Now, if you are considered non-essential, now that doesn't mean you're not important, okay? It just means you don't have to work during the emergency, okay? When you are released at that official release time, you will go on administrative leave, which is paid leave, and you will be paid 8 hours per regularly scheduled shift until the time that employees are told to return. Okay, so if you have an off day in there, you won't be paid for that off day. You'll be paid for the shifts that you're regularly scheduled, but you'll be paid for 8 hours per day, regardless of whether your shift is longer than that. There's right now a maximum admin leave of 40 hours, but if it's a really large emergency, the president has the authority to increase that amount. Okay, so if you're gone outside of what's approved, then you again are on your own time. There are some resources out there for you. You've already heard reference to IHOP Policy 3.1.1, which talks about a lot of the things I just mentioned. The acknowledgement form, and the adverse events toolkit. If you go to the emergency preparedness site from the homepage, there is a link to the adverse events toolkit. And for those of you who are managers, that can be really useful because it has a paper option for every human resource transaction that we do, just in case the system goes down for some reason. So you would be able to do whatever transactions you would need in paper format. Okay. And once again, you've seen this before. Okay.
Hello, everybody. My name is Raymond Cooper, and if you haven't already guessed by my attire, I'm with the University of Texas Police Department. As already discussed by Dr. Rogers and Ms. Conley, if you haven't already done so, meet with your supervisor or your advisor and determine if you're actually considered an essential E1 employee. And if so, they'll map out for you what they expect you to do before, during, and after an emergency. And that really is one of the reasons for the E1 card, because it helps other persons other than your manager or your advisor to know on campus with a quick glance as to whether or not you're considered E1 or not. So if you don't already have one of these orange-collared E1 cards to hang on your tag or for your vehicle, it may be because you're either a new employee or a student, or in the past you weren't recognized or identified, excuse me, as an E1 or essential person. So usually what happens is once management determines that the emergency is impending and that they're going to call on the emergency status for the campus, then managers and advisors would be made aware of this, and then what they should be doing at that point, the managers and advisors should be calling their staff or the persons that they're responsible and speak with them, let them know originally, or remind them that they're E1 status, and then issue to them at that time a orange card for their person and also an orange card for their vehicle. So if an E1 employee has already obtained the orange card and a plaque from the manager, what this does for you is it ensures entry into parking garages during emergency status. And it sounds strange, I guess, but if you hadn't been through a hurricane here, the garages are open for public use 24/7. But on an emergency situation like this, we'll actually assign officers to the garages that we're using, and we do that for more than one reason. We want to make sure that the vehicles parked there and the items that they may have inside the car are safe. So we have officers at the entry and exits of the garage, and then officers that actually patrol the garage. And we want to make sure that unauthorized persons aren't parking the vehicles there and that they're not entering on foot as well. And so persons wanting to enter the garage, whether on foot or on vehicle, are going to have to show an officer one of these E1 cards, either on the vehicle and on their person. So, and it ensures parking into the garages during the emergency, and it also helps passage through island checkpoints for re-entry for personnel immediately after the storm. So once again, if you didn't undergo or endure, I should say, the last hurricane, what happens is the emergency situation is called for the entire island. They called for an island evacuation, and so we set up checkpoints at all the entry points. So at these checkpoints, where you could expect to see Galveston City Police Department and also the Galveston County Sheriff's Department, as well as University of Texas Police and possibly Department of Public Safety if they have staffing available. So we have a number of officers at the entry and exit checkpoints, and so for a person to be able to gain access or entry back into the island, you're going to have one of these orange E1 cards on your person and on your vehicle. So if you're traveling back, if you've gotten the notice to come back to the island and you realize, oh my gosh, I've forgotten my orange cards, my recommendation is don't stand in those big lines, because once you get up to the point, University of Texas Police and the other police departments have been advised not to let you in. So it's just going to be a long wait for yourself, and then of course you'll have to get turned around and go back home and find your card. Okay, so you want to display your UTM badge at all times. If not known, that's a policy. So your UTM badge, a lot of people carry it on the outside, which is what we're supposed to be doing. But if you have a habit of maybe putting it in your purse or your briefcase or whatever, please begin displaying that publicly. That's what we want to do at all times so the police officers can easily identify you. And then during the emergency situation, we especially want you to have that card, because once again, we're here to protect you and the university's property, and it's easier for the police officers whenever they see you with your card to immediately identify you as a person that's with UTMB and you're supposed to be here. So in addition to the UTMB badge, you also want to display the orange-colored vehicle E1 card on the dashboard of your car at all times, and also display that orange card along with your ID card as you're walking around or working on campus. Now, with your vehicle, you want to put it on your dashboard, and you want to enter the garage if that's where you're going to park your car, but you want to leave it there on the dash. For some reason, some persons parking in the garage took their card away, and so what happens is after the garage is full, the officer that's walking from floor to floor checking on the safety of the vehicles there, making sure unauthorized persons aren't there. We're also checking to make sure somebody didn't slip by us and park their personal car that is not supposed to be there. So we don't want your car to be inadvertently towed away if you have permission to park there. Okay, so in addition to your orange cards, there's something I'd like to talk to you about, and it's about securing your property, both personal and UTMB-owned property. For whatever the reason, some persons who have office space or cubicles decided to leave their personal items at UTMB, and during the storm, either because of the storm, windows being blown out, or flooding, and or unauthorized persons possibly entering the rooms, some people were reporting that some of their personal items were missing when they came back. So we recommend that you actually take all of your personal items out of your workspace before you leave in an emergency situation. We also actually would like to see you conduct an inventory of your office items, all the UTMB-owned property, and make a list of that and keep it with you. And then when you come back, use that as a checkoff list and make sure that all the items that were there when you left are still there. And then if you happen to notice something missing, please don't hesitate. We want you to call the police department at either the emergency or the non-emergency number as fast as possible and report that. Reason being is if somebody's recently gone into your space unauthorized and removed some items that are owned by UTMB, we might be able to locate them either on campus or on the island with those items, depending on what they are. So the faster you report it, the faster that we can spring into action and maybe recover some of the stuff that's missing. In addition to that, we also want to report all the stuff that are actually missing that we couldn't recover, so that UTMB at the end of the day can tabulate the number of the dollar amount in the loss. Excuse me. And then finally, you want to await instructions from leadership before discarding any damaged property. As a result of the storm, this last one, because of flooding and various other things that happened to the property, people took it upon themselves and determined that something was damaged beyond use and decided to discard it. Well, we don't want to do that, because UTMB needs to also make a note of the things that were damaged that need to be replaced for insurance purposes. So if there's anything damaged, you want to notify your supervisor or your advisor first before discarding anything. And that's all I have. So you'll see the familiar UTMB alerts sign, and we'll turn it over to the next speaker.
Hello, I'm Seth Fry from Information Services, and today I just wanted to go over the business continuity process at UTMB and also how that relates to the hurricane season. So every single year, UTMB identifies a set of key risks. For 2015, those risks were defined as weather-related emergencies, utilities outages, disease outbreaks, and mass casualty incidents. But this time of year, our primary concern is going to be hurricanes. So in order to prepare for that, we have already developed a general set of strategies. For the educational enterprise, we have emergency protective measures that we put in place with 2 contractors. They will move key assets, supplies, and equipment from first floors to second floors, or in some cases to off-island locations. We have the ability to compress course schedules if necessary, and also expand online learning if our facilities are out of commission for prolonged periods of time. And then we've also developed contingency space with the University of Texas at Austin, and also with the Texas Medical Center. For our research enterprise, we have similar protective measures as we do in education. We'll remove assets out of harm's way. And then we also have plans to consolidate animals to the safest buildings so they are not harmed. We also have the ability to stage portable equipment such as AC units and generators, and we do this to protect our animals and research projects that could have been ongoing for months, in some cases years. And then we also have available emergency supplies on hand, such as dry ice and liquid nitrogen, in order to maintain our freezers. For the health system, we will make use of temporary care at alternate facilities, both within UTMB and outside if necessary. And in the most extreme cases, we will rely on our partners and develop an on-site mobile hospital. The ambulatory clinics, they have pre-existing business continuity plans and have relocation sites for each one of their clinics. And since IKE, we now have strong contractor support to restore all services to our healthcare system in order to get them back up and running as soon as possible. For our institutional support functions, these include business and finance and the president's office. We've already identified alternate space for key functions such as accounts payable, payroll, in order to get all of our employees paid on time, and also the FEMA reimbursement process as we're recovering. We also have mechanisms to provide communications to employees and patients, and Steve will go over that a little bit more in depth in a minute. The university police will protect our employees and our facilities both during the storm and during reentry. And business operations and facilities will also have a lead role in supporting each one of your business continuity plans. And information services, we have plans in place, disaster recovery plans in place, that will protect all of our critical applications and get them up and running as soon as possible. So in addition to the general strategies that we have as a university, we also have individual department plans. And just a little bit on the UTMB policy. Department plans should be updated annually or as processes change. We generally encourage you to look at your plans right before hurricane season and try and update them before June 1st. And also all personnel should be familiar with and guided by their department plans in case you do have a business interruption. So a little bit about the content of your business continuity plan. Business continuity plans include business impact analysis that will tell you what your critical business functions are within your department. And you should also have backup and recovery strategies and alternate facilities defined if your critical business processes are interrupted. Your business continuity plan will also include key contact information, as well as a list of critical supplies to be kept on hand. And in the event that you can't get critical supplies, there's also a vendor list available. It's also important to know your role. Do you know what your downtime procedures are if critical systems fail? Many departments have downtime procedures or manual processes that they follow if one of their information systems, such as Epic, for example, is down. You have a set of downtime procedures. Do you know those procedures? You also need to know your role before, during, and after the emergency. Many department plans include checklists or procedures that individuals need to follow, so you need to be aware of those as well. In the case of weather emergencies, you need to know whether or not you anticipate being part of the ride-out team or being off-site and returning as part of the relief team. Many departments also include work-from-home plans, so you need to be aware what your policy is in your department. And it's important to be able to contact your supervisor and or your own staff, and all that information should be included in your departmental business continuity plans. And lastly, do you know how to order supplies? Do you know where your supplies are? And if you're running out, do you know who to contact in order to get those supplies? For more information, you can go to our emergency management page, and there's a link to business continuity. It includes information such as some of the policies that I mentioned. It includes the new business continuity plan template, a glossary of terms, and also the current UTMB institutional business continuity plan. So I encourage everyone to check this out. You can should have access to your own departmental plans as well, and a lot of valuable links. And lastly, since you haven't seen this slide before, I encourage you to go mobile with UTMB alerts. Now, Steve.
So lastly, and we'll get wrapped up for the afternoon. So how are you going to stay in touch, and how are you going to know what is going on? As Dr. Rogers spoke a little bit earlier, Incident Command will be driving the communications that will be going out throughout the emergency, and will ultimately be the decision maker about whether it's the stay, go, and the return. We will use pretty much every communication channel available to us, and we've highlighted what most of those are here on the slides to communicate with you as far as what's going on, what's the status here on campus, and what's the status of actually the stay, go, and return. Use all of these and make sure that you've got access to each one of these overall. One of the ones I do want to point out is the news media as well. And so while we don't own the news media and we are driving the emails and our own social media pages and our IUTMB, we will be communicating with the news media on a very routine basis, and they will be getting information out as well. So use all of these different components that you have. And another really key message is this will be great information as far as what's going on overall with the university and what's going on, but you also need to make sure that you're in communication with your supervisor, that you know what your departmental plan is, that again, that you know whether you're an essential employee or not, and that you have processes and that you understand what those processes are within your own work unit to also make those decisions of what you're supposed to be doing at that point in time. I know you probably haven't heard about this before, but I think, again, I really do think that I really want to encourage everybody to make sure that you are registered for UTMB alerts. There's a variety of ways to get there. For me, I think the easiest way is you go into IUTMB, you go to the directory, you search on your own name. There's a button that says Edit. Where you're able to edit your information that will then take you in, and that you can go into personal information, and then you can find the alerts button. button. Make sure that information is updated. That will be a full, safe way to make sure that we're able to stay in touch. And you've heard this multiple times, pick text first and mobile phone second is the ideal. Most people have a mobile phone. Text tends to be the most reliable when all other systems are down. Like Debbie said, if you have your work number or home number and you're not here, that doesn't help very much either. And so we really want to encourage you to make sure that you go in and sign up for all your contact information there as well. So I think with that, any closing words, Dr. Rogers?
So we have a few minutes for Q&A because everyone was actually so much on point that we're 5 minutes ahead of schedule. So questions from the audience?
Dr. Rogers, we've actually had a few questions coming in over the past few weeks, and most of those involve the multiple campuses that we have now. For example, the car placard, it talks about parking garages here, so folks ask, do we need those if we're an Angled and Danbury campus or League City campus? And the answer is yes, for a number of reasons. One is DPS will be looking for 3 things, as Lieutenant Cooper mentioned. It'll be your valid ID card, your car placard, and your E1 card. Without those 3 things, they're going to turn you around. Can't guarantee that they're going to actually let you through, and there may be traffic that may not allow that, but you need to have those 3 things. The other thing is that if you're assigned to another campus, there may be a very good reason why you need to come to main campus and, and during an emergency and park in the garage, and then therefore, you'll need that car placard to enter the garage. Other questions involve the annual acknowledgement form in regard to other campuses. There's some campus-specific information on that, so I would just say go ahead and do the form. Fill it out to the best of your ability, and maybe, unless Debbie's got any other additional comments on that.
We have revised the form for CMC since their situation is quite a bit different, and probably for next year the acknowledgement form will be a little bit more general in nature instead of referring to Galveston, but it still applies. All the items on the form apply.
Questions from the audience? Old hat, everyone's ready for the next storm. Super, and then I think we are adjourned. Thank you.
UTMB Health, working together to work wonders.